I met Elena in a coffee shop downtown, the kind of place that sold overpriced cappuccinos and had too many plants hanging from the ceiling. I wasn't supposed to be there. I had an appointment across the street that got cancelled last minute, and instead of fighting traffic back to the office, I ducked inside to kill some time. She was sitting 2 tables over, flipping through a thick photography portfolio, muttering to herself and making frustrated faces. I caught myself staring a little longer than was polite, not because she was beautiful, though she was, but because there was something about her energy that made the whole room feel sharper. When she caught me watching, she didn't look away or act shy. She smiled like she knew exactly what she was doing, and before I realized it, we were sharing a table, 2 strangers laughing about spilled coffee and torn sleeves and the absurdity of bad days. 1 hour turned into 2. 2 turned into exchanging numbers. A week later, we had our first real date, a quiet dinner at a family-owned Italian place she swore had the best tiramisu in the city. It did. I pretended not to be impressed. She saw right through it. It wasn't hard with Elena. She didn't play games. She didn't pretend to be something she wasn't. She loved what she loved, photography, traveling, small bookstores that smelled like old paper, and she had no problem dragging you into her world with a smile that made you forget whatever you thought you were supposed to be doing. We moved fast, but it didn't feel reckless. A year later, we were married in a backyard ceremony surrounded by string lights, friends, and enough champagne to flood the neighbor's lawn. She started her own photography business a few months after that, portraits, weddings, product shots for local shops. I helped where I could, carrying equipment, setting up lights, pretending to know what aperture meant when she needed a second pair of hands. Watching her work was like watching magic happen. She made people relax in ways I'd never seen before, caught moments that didn't even seem possible until she showed you the photos afterward. Meanwhile, my own career was solid. I ran a small but successful consulting firm that handled mid-size business expansions, not flashy, but steady. It gave us comfort. Weekends away. Nice dinners without checking the bill. A house that felt like ours, open, full of light, walls lined with framed prints from our favorite trips. We talked about kids a lot. Not in a someday way, but in a where would the crib go kind of way. We weren't rushing, but it was clear both of us saw it coming. Building a family wasn't a maybe, it was just another chapter waiting its turn. Our friends used to joke that we were obnoxiously good together. Always finishing each other's sentences, always moving like 2 people who didn't have to explain anything. It wasn't an act. It was real. Whatever magic people thought they saw between us, it was just life, easy, full, solid. Our days had a certain rhythm to them, one that settled into place almost without us noticing. Mornings were a dance, Elena brewing coffee while I packed lunches for the day, both of us weaving around each other in the kitchen with half-sleepy smiles and stolen kisses. Sometimes she had early shoots, heading out with her camera bag slung over her shoulder and a quick wave at the door. Other mornings, she lingered, editing photos on the couch while the sunlight poured through the windows, sipping coffee so slowly it almost became an art form. I loved those mornings. The normalcy of it. The way it felt like the house itself breathed when we were both there, moving through routines that felt easy, lived in. Weekdays usually meant work swallowing up the better parts of our attention. I spent most days in meetings or traveling between client sites, making sure everything stayed glued together. Elena would be out chasing golden hour light across the parks, setting up shoots at tiny cafes, or traveling to client homes for personal portrait sessions. Her work was flexible, unpredictable in a way that made her glow. Mine was structured and heavy, the way I needed it to be. It balanced. We balanced. Weekends were ours. Saturday mornings were usually for the farmer's market, fresh flowers for the house, handmade soaps for Elena, overpriced pastries we swore we didn't need but bought anyway. Some weekends we took short trips, booking cozy Airbnb spots a few hours away just to change the scenery. Other times, we spent the whole 2 days at home, reorganizing the garage, repainting a room because Elena saw a new color she couldn't live without, or simply sitting side by side on the porch, saying nothing, needing nothing. The house itself was a reflection of us, cozy but elegant. Light woods, big windows, an open-plan kitchen that was more Elena's dream than mine, and a small photography studio she had slowly built in one of the extra rooms. Her framed prints lined the halls, a gallery of memories caught in perfect color. We hosted dinner parties more often than we probably should have. Friends, family, neighbors, the door was always open. Elena loved cooking elaborate meals, fussing over table settings, lighting candles even for casual gatherings. Our friends joked that it felt like stepping into a magazine spread every time they came over. Maybe it did. But none of it felt forced. It just felt right. There were talks about expanding her business. A studio downtown maybe, a few employees to take on the editing load she hated. Nothing rushed, just dreams spoken into the air between sips of wine on late nights when the house was dark and quiet except for us. Money wasn't something we talked about much, and when we did, it wasn't with stress. We lived comfortably, traveled when we wanted to, and knew that if something unexpected came up, we could handle it. It felt like we had stepped into the life we had always been aiming for without even noticing how carefully we had climbed there. Even the little arguments, about whose turn it was to take the car for servicing, or whether a certain shade of paint was definitely not yellow, felt easy to solve. Like bumping into furniture you knew was always there. It was our life, and it was real good. Fall always seemed to bring out the best in Elena. Maybe it was the way the leaves burned gold across the skyline, or the way the cooler air made the light softer, richer, the way she loved to capture it. Every year when September rolled around, her calendar filled up like clockwork, family portraits in the parks, couples posing under canopies of orange, high school seniors in cozy sweaters trying not to look too awkward. I loved watching her work during those months. She was in her element, laughing with clients, crouching in the dirt to get the perfect angle, waving her hands around animatedly when she described her ideas. Sometimes, when our schedules lined up, I tagged along to help carry equipment. She would thank me with that bright smile of hers, and I'd joke that my only payment was dinner. It was a good trade. It always felt like a good trade. At home, life stayed steady. We hosted a Halloween party that year, nothing wild, just costumes, cider, bowls of candy too tempting to resist. Elena dressed up as a 1950s film star, all red lips and perfect curls. I threw on an old leather jacket and claimed I was a time traveler. We spent the night surrounded by friends, laughter filling the rooms, music humming low under it all. Thanksgiving was the same kind of chaos, too much food, not enough chairs, nieces and nephews running through the house like a pack of wolves. Elena loved every second of it, snapping candid shots between bites of pie, capturing the kind of messy, beautiful moments that most people missed. Christmas followed like it always did, filling the house with the smell of pine needles and cinnamon, the soft glow of lights Elena insisted we string up inside and out. She took her camera downtown one snowy afternoon and came back glowing with excitement, flipping through shots of the town square blanketed in white, kids building lopsided snowmen, street lamps casting long shadows over untouched sidewalks. It wasn't just her career that was thriving. It was her spirit. Her energy. And I loved being next to it, even if sometimes it felt like trying to hold on to a firefly without dimming its light. We even started more serious talks about kids after the holidays, not just, someday, but real plans. Checking out the extra room upstairs, quietly agreeing it would make a perfect nursery. Smiling across the dinner table at the thought of what might come next. Money stayed steady. Clients kept coming. The shop kept expanding. There was a feeling that everything we had worked for, the late nights, the early mornings, the risks and leaps of faith, was finally building into something bigger. Something lasting. Friends asked us for advice on relationships now. Joked that we had it all figured out. Elena would just laugh and say there was no secret, just patience, love, and a lot of wine. And if I'm being honest, it felt true. We didn't have secrets. We didn't hide things from each other. Our phones lay face up on counters, our schedules written out in the shared kitchen calendar, our plans tossed back and forth in casual conversations without hesitation. Spring came in slow that year, dragging its heels through the last cold winds and muddy streets, but when it finally settled in, everything seemed to stretch and breathe again. Elena was always busiest in the spring. Weddings, engagement shoots, senior portraits gearing up for graduation, her calendar filled up fast, and she loved every second of it. Watching her juggle bookings, meetings, last-minute edits, and late-night print orders would have been exhausting if it weren't for the way she made it look effortless. Somehow, she thrived in the chaos. We set up a better workspace for her that season, an upgrade to the small studio she'd carved out upstairs. New lighting rigs, a proper editing station, walls painted crisp white to bounce light the way she liked. I remember spending a full weekend covered in paint splatters and dust, teasing her about her endless vision boards, taped up everywhere. She kissed the side of my face when it was done, told me it was perfect, and the way she said it made every sore muscle worth it. Meanwhile, the consulting firm kept steady. New contracts came in, old clients renewed, and I found myself thinking more seriously about expanding the team. Nothing too big, just enough to free up some of my hours so I could focus more on the parts of the job I actually enjoyed. Our home life stayed easy, the same dance of two people who knew each other's rhythms without needing words. Some nights we barely crossed paths, me coming in late for meetings, her heading out early for sunrise shoots, but when we did, it felt natural to slip back into each other's space, picking up whatever conversation we'd left dangling days earlier. We still made time for the little things. Late-night movie marathons on the couch. Sunday morning runs to the bakery down the street. Impromptu drives to nowhere just because the sun was out and the roads were empty. Elena never stopped taking photos, even when it wasn't for work. She documented everything, the dog sprawled across the kitchen floor, the way the light hit my face when I read on the porch, the first bloom of the cherry tree in the front yard. Our life was captured in tiny frames, strung together in photo albums that lived stacked neatly in the living room, where anyone could flip through and see the little world we had built. Our friends kept calling us, that couple, the ones who made it look easy. It wasn't that we didn't have hard days. Of course we did. There were arguments, frustrations, stupid misunderstandings that flared up and died out like summer storms. But none of it ever stuck. None of it ever felt bigger than what we had. We were good. We were solid. There were plans to travel more that year. Elena wanted to visit a few national parks, take a real road trip instead of just talking about it. We spent evenings mapping routes, picking places off her long, someday list, pretending we wouldn't get lost even though both of us knew we absolutely would. There was a future we could see clearly stretching out in front of us. And at that time, standing in the thick of it, I couldn't imagine a reason to question anything. It felt like everything was exactly where it was supposed to be. The first real warmth of summer started to creep in, pulling the days longer, making everything feel just a little lazier in the best way. Our weekends shifted too, fewer quick trips, more time spent in the backyard, grilling dinners we didn't plan, sipping wine under strings of fairy lights Elena had hung from the trees. Her business was thriving. Every day, it seemed like a new client inquiry popped up. Engagements, brand shoots, portfolio sessions. She barely had time to edit before the next booking lined up. I loved seeing her so alive with it, her hands flying across her laptop late into the night, a smile playing on her lips when she finally looked up to tell me about some amazing shot she caught earlier that day. Meanwhile, work on my end stayed consistent. The company was expanding slower than I'd hoped, but there was something solid about that too, the kind of growth that meant it would last. We still found time for each other, late breakfasts on Saturdays, lazy movie nights, early morning coffees squeezed between meetings and shoots. It wasn't always perfect, but it was full and real, and it felt like we were exactly where we were supposed to be. Sometimes, Elena talked about opening a second small studio, maybe renting a loft space downtown to handle bigger client loads. I encouraged it, of course. She was talented, and it made me proud to see her ambition turning into something concrete. Life was busy. But it was busy in all the ways we had once dreamed about. Or at least, that's how it seemed. It happened on a Saturday, just after lunch. We had finished eating outside, burgers, chips, a pitcher of lemonade sweating between us on the table, and I offered to handle the dishes while she ran upstairs to organize some of her files. She was prepping for a big shoot the next day and wanted everything lined up ahead of time. When I finished in the kitchen, I wandered upstairs, meaning to grab the basket of laundry she had left by the stairs. As I passed by her office, the door was open just a crack. Nothing weird about that, Elena hated closed doors. But inside, I caught a glimpse of her at her desk, quickly sliding a folder under another stack of papers when she heard my footsteps. I didn't stop. I didn't ask. It wasn't even a big movement, just a small, casual flick of her wrist, a motion too fast, too deliberate for someone just organizing paperwork. She smiled when I popped my head in and asked if she needed coffee for the editing session ahead of her. Said she was fine. Blew me a kiss across the room and promised she'd be down in an hour. I smiled back, grabbed the laundry basket, and went back downstairs. It was probably nothing. Busy days made people act weird sometimes, frazzled, distracted, forgetful. But somewhere in the back of my mind, a little knot tightened. Just a small one. Just enough to notice. It wasn't enough to accuse, or to even really worry. But for the first time in a long time, I realized there was a corner of her world I didn't fully see anymore. And I wasn't sure why. The next week passed in a way that didn't seem different at first. Elena was busy, bouncing between shoots, editing sessions, client calls. I stayed busy too, juggling meetings, chasing down late payments, trying to keep everything moving forward while the summer heat made it harder to focus. But the feeling stayed. It wasn't always there, gnawing at me. Most of the time, life moved like it always had. Coffee in the mornings. Texts during the day. Dinner at the counter when our schedules lined up right. Elena laughing at some dumb joke I made. Ava barking at squirrels in the backyard like she was defending a fortress. Normal. Familiar. But now and then, I'd catch something out of the corner of my eye that didn't quite sit right. The way Elena would close her laptop a little too fast when I walked by. The way she started taking more calls outside, sitting on the back steps instead of pacing around the kitchen like she used to. They were little things. Small enough to brush off individually. Together, though, they added a weight to the air I couldn't shake. One night, after she had gone to bed early claiming a headache, I stayed up on the couch, flicking through TV channels without really seeing any of it. Her camera bag sat by the door, zipped up neatly the way she always left it after a shoot. I caught myself staring at it, wondering who she had shot that day. Wondering when I had started wondering. We used to talk about her work all the time. She loved sharing her favorite photos with me, showing me the shots she was proud of, the weird stories about strange clients or perfect sunsets she managed to catch at the last minute. Lately, those conversations had gotten thinner. Shorter. Like she was tired, or distracted, or just not as interested in looping me into her world anymore. It wasn't enough to accuse. It wasn't even enough to be angry. It was just enough to notice. Enough to file away. I told myself it was the busy season. That we were both stretched thin. That relationships ebbed and flowed and this was just a lull, the way work sometimes took priority over everything else for a while. But part of me, the part that had built a life with her, that knew her better than anyone, couldn't stop feeling like I was missing something. Like a door had closed somewhere, quietly, while I wasn't looking. Still, I didn't say anything. I didn't ask about the phone calls. I didn't dig through her emails. I didn't open the camera bag to see what wasn't being shown to me anymore. I wanted to trust her the way I always had. I needed to. So I smiled when she kissed my forehead distractedly and mumbled about editing deadlines. I nodded when she said she might need to book a few late sessions the next week. I told her to take whatever time she needed when she said she was thinking about booking a weekend shoot out of town for a big client. Because love, real love, isn't supposed to be suspicious. It's supposed to trust even when you're scared to. And back then, sitting there with the dog snoring at my feet and the weight of something invisible pressing down on me, I was still trying to be the man who believed in that. Even if a small, quiet part of me already knew better. The end of summer hit harder than I expected. Days that once stretched long and lazy started to shrink. The air got cooler. The sun dipped earlier. Elena's schedule didn't slow down with the change of season, if anything, it picked up even more. Fall weddings, engagement shoots, a handful of small business branding sessions. Her laptop lived on the kitchen table more than it did in her office now, her coffee cups trailing from room to room like breadcrumbs. I tried not to think too much about the moments that kept piling up, small but persistent. Times when she answered calls in the other room with the door closed. Times when she brushed off questions about who she was working with. Times when she would disappear into her office after dinner and stay there long after I'd gone to bed, the faint glow of her monitor the last light on in the house. At first, I chalked it up to work stress. She had always been passionate about her business, always pushed herself harder than necessary to meet deadlines and deliver perfect results. It made sense that she'd be overwhelmed sometimes, that she'd need space to focus. I told myself that over and over, but the more I said it, the less I believed it. One afternoon, I came home early from a client meeting that had been cancelled last minute. I didn't call ahead, no reason to, really, and when I stepped into the house, it was unusually quiet. No music playing from the speakers like usual. No clicking keyboard. No sound at all. I walked past the living room, into the kitchen, and found her camera equipment spread out across the table. She was nowhere in sight. Curious more than anything, I glanced at the folders she had stacked there. Most of them were labeled the way she always did, last names, dates, neat and professional. But one caught my eye because it wasn't labeled like the others. It just had a first name, scrawled quickly across the cover, and it wasn't a name I recognized from any of the conversations we'd had about her clients. I reached out without thinking, running my hand lightly over the folder, debating whether or not to open it. Something about it made my stomach knot. Before I could make a decision, I heard her footsteps on the stairs and pulled my hand back like a kid caught reaching for the cookie jar. Elena came into the kitchen a second later, all smiles, asking about my day like nothing was strange. I answered her, matching her energy, pretending that everything felt normal when it absolutely didn't. I didn't mention the folder. I didn't ask about the name. Not because I didn't want to know, but because I was afraid of what the answer might be. I wasn't ready to cross that line yet. I wasn't ready to be the guy who snooped, who accused without proof, who tore down the trust we had spent years building just because of a few bad feelings I couldn't explain. But as we stood there, side by side, making small talk about work and dinner plans and the latest show she wanted to binge, I couldn't shake the feeling that a part of her had already drifted somewhere I couldn't reach. I wasn't looking for trouble. I wasn't looking for heartbreak. But sometimes, you don't get to choose when the truth starts clawing its way to the surface. A few days later, the house felt unusually quiet. Elena had rushed out earlier for a last-minute client meeting, barely pausing to kiss me goodbye before grabbing her bag and disappearing down the driveway. I stayed behind with a loose plan to catch up on paperwork, but most of the evening slipped by with me half distracted, the house humming in that strange, empty way it sometimes did when she was gone. At some point, while straightening up the living room, I wandered past her workspace. Her folders were still scattered across the table, a little messier than usual. One folder in particular caught my eye, the same one I had noticed earlier, the one labeled with a single unfamiliar name. I hesitated for a long moment. Part of me still wanted to believe there was nothing to find. That opening it would make me feel like a fool, that it would be better to let it sit there, untouched, preserving the version of my life I still wanted to believe in. But my hand moved before my mind could stop it. I flipped open the cover carefully. The first few photographs seemed normal enough, portraits, a few candid shots. But as I turned the pages, the tone of the images shifted. They weren't professional portraits anymore. They weren't posed in any way that made sense for a portfolio. There were photos of Elena and a man I didn't recognize, close, personal shots that no client session should ever produce. Their bodies close, their hands too familiar, the expressions on their faces not the kind of smiles you share with a stranger. The more I looked, the heavier my chest felt. It wasn't just inappropriate, it was intimate in a way that made every room in the house feel smaller, every breath harder to take. There was no angle from which this was just a misunderstanding. No version of this that was innocent. I set the folder down slowly, my hands trembling more than I wanted to admit. The betrayal wasn't loud. It wasn't messy. It was quiet. It was sitting there on glossy paper, caught forever, undeniable. Elena hadn't just crossed a line, she had obliterated it. She had documented it. For a few minutes, I just stood there, the house settling around me like it was trying to pretend it hadn't been the scene of something broken. I stared out the window at the driveway, half expecting her car to pull up, half wondering if I could even look her in the eye when it did. I closed the folder and tucked it back under the stack where I found it, pushing it into the background like that could somehow push the betrayal away too. But the images were burned into my mind now. No hiding would erase them. There was a different weight pressing on me now, a sick, gnawing feeling that what I found was just the beginning. People don't make a habit of slipping once and photographing it like a trophy. If this had happened once, it had probably happened before. And I knew, deep down, without needing to flip through another folder or ask a single question, that Elena's camera had captured more than just that one secret. I didn't know what I was going to do next. I just knew that whatever came after this moment, there was no going back to the life we had before. And there was no forgiving what I had seen. I didn't sleep at all that night. The images I had found carved themselves into my mind, ugly and permanent. Every time I closed my eyes, they were there waiting for me, louder than the silence around me. I stopped trying to convince myself that there was a misunderstanding, that maybe there was some excuse buried somewhere. No, what I had seen was undeniable. It wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern, deliberate, repeated, hidden in plain sight. The next morning, I waited for Elena to leave again. She had another shoot, something she had scheduled at the last minute, and she kissed me goodbye like nothing had changed. I smiled back without saying much, watching her walk out the door with her camera bag slung casually over her shoulder. When her car disappeared around the corner, I went back to her workspace, my chest tight but my mind clear. It didn't take long to find more. Tucked deep in the drawers, underneath old receipts and client contracts, were more folders, each labeled with a single unfamiliar name. I pulled them out carefully, stacking them on the desk like evidence at a crime scene. Each folder told the same story, different faces, different setups, but the same intimacy, the same betrayal stamped into every frame. I didn't need to go through them all. 3 folders, 4 folders, it didn't matter. The betrayal wasn't a one-time thing, and it wasn't even isolated to one man. It was systematic. It was routine. And every time she smiled at me over dinner or reached for my hand in the dark, she knew exactly what she was hiding. The anger didn't come in a burst. It built slowly, pressing heavier into my chest with every second, sharpening my thoughts until they were cold and clear. There would be no confrontation, no screaming matches, no second chances. There would only be action. Swift. Final. When Elena came home later that afternoon, she found me waiting for her. I stood in the hallway with her overnight bag already packed and sitting by the door. I didn't bother with explanations. I didn't shout. I didn't even ask for hers. The moment she stepped inside, I handed her the bag and told her plainly, she was leaving. She wasn't welcome here anymore. She wasn't part of this house, this life, this future. At first, she laughed, that high, nervous laugh she always gave when she didn't know how to fix something. Then the reality hit her, and she tried every tactic in her arsenal. She begged, she cried, she demanded to know what I thought I knew. But it didn't matter. I had seen everything. I didn't owe her a conversation. I owed myself a clean break. I opened the front door and stood aside. She hesitated for a moment, trying to gauge if there was any chance left, but my face must have told her everything. She stormed out with a final screech of frustration, leaving the door swinging gently behind her. Once she was gone, I changed the locks the same night. Every piece of her that remained, clothes, shoes, the little trinkets she once left scattered around the house, was boxed and left on the porch for her to collect when she realized just how thoroughly she had been cut off. She hadn't just lost me. She had lost the life she had built on my trust and loyalty, a life she had decided wasn't enough. I had given her everything. And now, I would take back everything she thought she could keep. In the days that followed, the silence in the house changed. It wasn't heavy anymore. It wasn't waiting for a storm to break. It was clean, absolute, the kind of silence that comes after you finally tear down walls you should have ripped apart a long time ago. Elena tried to call at first. She left voicemails that swung wildly between pleading and anger, like she couldn't decide which version of herself might win me back. I didn't answer any of them. I didn't even listen after the first few seconds. Her words meant nothing now. She could try to rewrite the story in her head all she wanted, but it didn't change the facts I had seen with my own eyes. She showed up at the house once, standing on the porch like she thought she could just walk back in and reset everything. I didn't even open the door. I watched her through the front window, her mouth moving frantically as she pounded on the glass, and then I turned away and let her scream into the empty air. Eventually, she left, shoulders slumped, rage deflated into something smaller, sadder, less dangerous. From there, it unraveled fast for her. Word started to spread among her client base, not because I told anyone, but because Elena was messy. Clients noticed missed appointments. Payment disputes. Unprofessional behavior that no one wanted to be associated with. It didn't take long for the whispers to turn into cancellations, and cancellations into full collapse. The studio she had dreamed about opening never materialized. The reputation she worked so hard to build slipped through her fingers faster than she could scramble to hold it together. The gigs dried up. The inquiries stopped coming. Even the photography community, small and tightly connected in our city, started distancing themselves. Meanwhile, I kept moving. I dove into my work, restructuring my schedule, streamlining the parts of my business I had neglected while trying to support hers. It felt good to focus on something that was mine alone, to build without second-guessing who might be undermining it behind my back. Friends I hadn't seen much in recent years started coming around again. Dinners, poker nights, lazy Sunday afternoons watching football without worrying about who needed what from me. I realized quickly that I hadn't just been living with a cheater. I had been living with a weight I didn't even recognize until it was lifted. The house felt different now too. Cleaner. Brighter. Every piece of her that had once cluttered the rooms, her scattered jewelry, her half-finished projects, her endless mess of camera gear, was gone. What was left was quiet, simple, and fully mine. Sometimes I thought about how easily it could have gone differently. If I hadn't opened that folder. If I had brushed off my instincts like I almost did. If I had accepted the little half-truths she fed me instead of digging deeper. But those thoughts didn't linger long. There was no sadness now. Only a strange kind of gratitude. Gratitude that I found out before wasting more years. Gratitude that I saw the truth before it could bury me completely. Gratitude that I had the strength to burn it all down instead of pretending it wasn't already on fire. Elena lost everything she tried to keep hidden. And I, the one she thought would be left shattered, was the one who walked away standing taller than ever. The seasons changed again, almost without me noticing. Leaves turned gold and red, the mornings came colder, and the air carried that familiar edge of something ending in something beginning. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel stuck between the two. I wasn't mourning what I had lost. I was finally standing in the middle of my own life, fully awake to it. I made changes, slowly at first, but deliberately. I repainted rooms that had always been her choice of color, choosing shades that felt cleaner, brighter, more mine. I replaced the battered dining table she once insisted we keep with something solid, something that didn't carry the ghost of arguments and broken promises. Every piece of the life we had built together that didn't serve me anymore was stripped away, until the house didn't feel haunted by her memory, it felt like freedom. Work kept growing. Opportunities one might have missed before started falling into place. Without the distractions, without the hidden battles I hadn't even realized I was fighting, everything became clearer. Sharper. My decisions got better. My energy came back. The shop thrived under my full attention, and the expansion we once talked about, the one she had vaguely promised to help with but never prioritized, finally moved from idea to reality. I found time for myself too. Long walks with no destination. Nights spent actually reading the stack of books gathering dust on the nightstand. Slow weekends where no one else's needs came before my own. The weight of pretending to be happy enough was gone, and in its place was something quiet and steady. I heard things about Elena here and there. Whispers through mutual friends we hadn't entirely lost. She was struggling. Jobs didn't stick. People didn't trust her anymore. New ventures failed before they started. Relationships collapsed under the weight of her own choices. I didn't take joy in it. I didn't need revenge to feel good. Knowing that I had taken my life back was enough. Sometimes, when I sat on the porch late at night, the memories came back, not the betrayals, but the early years, when it was still real. When there was laughter, and late-night drives, and plans drawn on napkins at diners. It would have been easy to let those memories sour everything, to let bitterness take root. But I refused. The truth was, not everything was a lie. Not every smile was fake. But what mattered was that she changed, and when she did, she chose herself over us, again and again, without hesitation. And when the time came, I chose myself too. There was a kind of peace in that. In knowing that I had given everything I had to the life we tried to build. In knowing that when it fell apart, it wasn't because I didn't fight hard enough, it was because some things aren't meant to be saved. Now, standing here with nothing but my own future stretched out ahead of me, I finally understood something simple, something I should have understood all along. Loyalty is never wasted. Love isn't either. Even when it's given to the wrong person, it teaches you what you deserve. And walking forward, stronger, smarter, free, I know exactly what kind of life I'm building now. And who I'll never let in again.